Hey guys, welcome back to another AP Sports video. Today I'm going to be talking about the Phoenix Suns and how they've turned around their entire team essentially over these last basically just 2 seasons, and why they're so competitive now and why they're so good. So I think the Phoenix Suns can be very dangerous in the playoffs. I know a lot of people are saying to begin the year potential 5-6 seed, but I think this team could be really even a 3 or 4 seed and could really make a run in the playoffs. I would not be surprised at all. I think they match up well with a lot of teams for a lot of different reasons that I'll get into. But I do think that I'm not saying that I would pick them to win the finals or even be in the finals, but they are a team that you have to consider contenders, at least from what we've seen so far this season. I know we're obviously only 5 games in, but they're 4-1 and their only losses come by 3 points. So to get it started off, sort of how the Suns did this over these last couple of years, first off is big changes in management. Obviously, over the last, really since he's owned the team, Robert Sarver owns Phoenix Suns. You have not heard good things about him. At least I haven't, whether it's the media saying things or former players and how he's treated players and like been in the locker room with them and tried to motivate them and stuff like that. It just wasn't really working. So what they did in 2019 is they made James Jones their general manager and the president of all their basketball operations. Since he's been named that, he's done an incredible job. He's hired Monty Williams, who I think is an incredible coach. He used to coach for the Pelicans as well as the New Orleans Hornets. And he was actually Chris Paul's coach in 2010, who they now have. So he's added Monty Williams. He's an incredible coach. He's never had like the best roster in the world, so it'll be interesting to see what happens this year. Cam Johnson was drafted in the 2018-2019 draft. He has been a very good three-point shooter, and honestly has even been more than that. He's looked pretty good driving to the basket and has been a decent defender. I didn't know if he was going to translate defensively to the NBA, but he's looked pretty solid. Mikal Bridges, obviously, as well. He has been nothing short of incredible defensively, as well as an incredible three-point shooter, and once again, he's underrated as a driver and can create shots for himself from time to time. So those two guys obviously are great. Cam Johnson comes off the bench more often than not, and McCall starts, but they both fill sort of similar roles. Cameron Payne is a guy also that I would want to talk about. He essentially was out of the league for a decent stretch, and then they picked him up, and he has once again been nothing short of incredible. I don't know how he turned it around so drastically. He basically went from playing worthless minutes on a bad team, whether it was he was on the Thunder for a little bit, the Bulls, he just kind of bounced around and never really found his groove, I guess, in the NBA. But with the Suns, he's played incredibly valuable minutes on what I would consider a finals contender. Then they also added Langston Galloway this offseason, obviously Chris Paul, and to do that they had to give up a first-round pick, Kelly Oubre Jr., Ty Jerome, Jalen McHugh, and Ricky Rubio. None of those guys right now have been playing exceptionally well. Obviously that first-round pick could turn into something, but with how the Suns are playing, I don't know if it will. Dario Saric, he re-signed with the Suns. I think that was a great addition. He's looked really good as their backup center. They've been able to stretch the floor. So, for example, I watched them play the Pelicans recently. Steven Adams is an incredible center, but when Saric is in the game with Adams, Adams can't defend the paint, so it's a massive advantage to the Suns' wings and guards. And obviously they got Chris Paul in that trade, but they also added Jay Crowder, who's another one of those wings that can play defense and shoot the three well. So they're surrounding Chris Paul and Devin Booker with a ton of guys that play good defense, are smart players, can shoot the three ball well, and really just complement any scoring guard in the NBA. And they're very deep at every position is another thing I'd like to add. They don't really have any glaring holes on this roster. I even think they have 3 point guards that are incredible. Cameron Payne's looked good, Chris Paul's looked good, and Javon Carter's looked good when he's played. So offensively, they basically have 8 players in double figures right now. Cameron Payne would be the exception. He's averaging 9.8, but I'm going to round up. So they have 8 players averaging in double figures. I mean, granted, they have had a couple blowouts, so they've had more people play off the bench, but they do an incredible job moving the ball, passing it around the perimeter, and then finding open cutters as well. So with that incredible ball movement, I would attribute this a lot to not only Chris Paul, but really Monty Williams as well as a coach, as well as James Jones in this roster construction. I know they might not necessarily have been able to control all of that, as in James Jones can't, but the guys that he's added have been incredibly high IQ guys that are prone to passing and aren't going to be selfish isolation players. So their roster is incredible. It's filled with great 3-and-D playmakers, and that's offensively. I would say the only issue for Phoenix offensively is Devin Booker's turnovers. He averaged 5.4 a game, which is shocking. I mean, that's a ton. That's more than that's just a lot. Like, that's basically a low turnover team is probably around the 8 to 10 per game range, and he's averaging about half of that, which is just crazy. I obviously expect that to change, but if you're going to put the ball in his hands, especially in the playoffs, you have to rely on him to hold on to the ball. So that's a concern for the playoffs for me. And another piece they added, I already talked about it a little bit, Dario Saric. He's looked incredible this year. Honestly, he doesn't even have to play well for his impact to be felt. This Suns team is a lot better when there's going to be more space in the paint because they can kick it out to open shooters. And there has been, especially when he's on the floor, because he can play the wing and shoot threes. So these other teams' centers have to stay on the outside unless they want to leave him open. He does an incredible job of bringing the other team's bigs out of the paint. And so defensively, as I've said a couple times now, they have incredible wing defenders. I honestly think Mikal Bridges has been maybe the best wing defender all season so far. I mean, I know it's only been 5 games, but he's done an incredible job guarding the other team's best player basically every single night. Now, defensively, I do think they have a hole, and that is at center. I do not think DeAndre Ayton has been great this year, especially on these pick and rolls. I feel like he can tend to get lost at times. But they have great help from these other wing players, so I'm not super concerned about that, but that would be a cause for concern if they were to play a team like the Nuggets, for example, with Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. Even on pick and fades, he has not looked great, closing out, especially on bigs that can shoot. So I would also say quick, younger guards like De'Aaron Fox. The Kings are the only team to beat the Suns this season, and in large part that was due to De'Aaron Fox playing incredibly well. Chris Paul, as good a defender as he is getting older, so it's going to be harder for him to keep up. And Devin Booker is not a great defender. He's honestly really just been hidden almost by this team because of all the other great defenders they have. But when they're guards that are as good as De'Aaron Fox and Jamal Murray, even in the playoffs potentially, it's going to be really hard to stop them if you're Devin Booker. So he's going to need help. I know they've put McCall on some of these other guys, but McCall on switches, I know that he's been incredible. He's basically guarded the 1 through 5, but one thing I also noticed in that Kings game when I watched it, he struggled a little bit with Bagley's size. They could not, and they really didn't put McCall on De'Aaron for some reason. I guess maybe the speed didn't translate quite as well, just because he is a little bit bigger. But when you put Bagley on McCall and his back was to the post, it was a little bit tough for McCall to guard Bagley in his post hook. And so I would say their weaknesses overall, I mean, this is just, once again, 5 games in the season. Devin Booker's turnovers, obviously, I mentioned earlier, and then Ayton's pick and roll defense. But other than that, this team has been incredible passing the ball, incredible defensively. They've rotated really well, at least in all the games I've seen. I would say that Devin Booker can definitely get those turnovers under control, especially with a leader like Chris Paul, hopefully helping him realize some of the mistakes he's making. But I would say that the Suns really can open up the Western Conference this year. I would not be surprised if they shock a lot of people and end up making it to the Western Conference Finals potentially. I will say a team that I think they'll struggle against would be, of course, the Lakers. A lot of teams would, but just with the size the Lakers have, it's going to be really, really hard for this Phoenix Suns team to keep up with Anthony Davis and LeBron James, especially when they have as good of individual defenders as they do on the Lakers. I don't necessarily think that bringing Saric to the outside is going to help that much like it has been against these other teams in his bench minutes. But with that being said, that's sort of why I think they can make a deep run. I mean, just really, I would say that there is no player on this team that I feel basically not confident in, as an NBA player. They all play incredibly well. They all play incredibly well together. They all shoot the ball pretty well outside of Ayton, but you don't necessarily need him to. So I would be really shocked if this team gets bounced early in the playoffs or really doesn't even make the playoffs, barring injury, of course. But they're a hard team to figure out just because they do have so many great scorers. And they can look to so many different options. I mean, you look at them the other night, they basically destroyed the Pelicans. Well, not basically, they did destroy the Pelicans. And Devin Booker and Chris Paul didn't even score in double figures. So that was it. Just the versatility of this team is what's so great about them. I would not be shocked at all, once again, if they're in the playoffs. But with that being said, I feel like I'm kind of repeating myself now. So thanks so much for watching, and peace.